On to this matter now. The Defend Our Democracy has expressed disappointment in the adoption of the Electoral Amendment Bill in its current form. This week, 232 MPs voted in favour of the controversial bill and 98 rejected it. The organisation wants meaningful and credible reforms to be implemented and is also considering a legal challenge. Let's bring in Defend Our Democracy's Neeshan Bolton for more on this issue. Thank you very much for joining us, Neeshan, this morning. Just maybe before we get into the specifics of the issues here, broadly, what were your biggest concerns with the adaptation of the bill in its current form, which unfortunately, according to many bodies, has now been put in place?
So look, at the heart of this matter is concerns about the quality of our democracy, the role of members of parliament and our public representatives. Essentially, we have a system where our public representatives, or who are supposed to have been public representatives, are really party political representatives. The clip that you've just shown from the president's visits to the Northern Cape, I think, is a classic example of that. There should be no reason why thousands of people must gather in a tent for the president to hear the issues. Had there been a constituency-based system, those members of parliament would have been making sure that the executive of our country would have been aware of all of these issues every day and every night. And that's the clearest example that I can give to you of why our current electoral system is failing. It does not represent our people and their issues. It represents political parties and doesn't hold the executive to account in a meaningful and fundamental way. And that's why we have this crisis of democracy today.
Yeah, and that's a very important point that you raised there, because the decisions that were taken around this bill just indicate that politicians or the political parties are really vested in their own interests rather than making sure that the citizens of this country are getting their basic needs or really just living out the democracy that was fought for.
Because the system doesn't allow us to hold them accountable. It doesn't force them to engage with people on an ongoing basis. And there's no way of holding them accountable over the decisions that they take in Parliament, ostensibly on behalf of people, but primarily on behalf of their political parties. And members of Parliament would find it very difficult to deviate from the policy or the positions of their political parties, even if the issue would be in the interest of voters or citizens of their particular areas. So it's a democracy that by and large fails to represent or fails to allow for the voices of people on the issues that affect their day-to-day lives.
It will be progressing through to the National Council of Provinces, Neeshan, and I'm just wondering if there's any hope in that regard that there will be active engagements with the civil society around it, the concerns and possibly some solutions. Are you confident that as it moves through the NCOP that there will be some meaningful discussions in this regard?
We always have to be hopeful that there will be some person or persons who are open to positive engagement. There's an element of rationality. But given the experience of Parliament and the Portfolio Committee, I think there would be slightly less optimism about a better outcome at the NCOP. But the civil society will engage with the NCOP process once we understand what that process is, what the timelines are. And likewise, if the NCOP merely rubber stamps what has come from Parliament, then ultimately we, and I suppose as many in society as possible, will have to see what kind of pressure can be applied on the President not to sign this bill into law.
And one of the actions that you have indicated you may consider taking on is legal action. Just give us a sense of whether or not these are continuous discussions you're having about a way forward, should it be signed into law, and really what you ultimately want to see the outcome to be.
So there is work underway to look at aspects around the legislation that can be legally challenged. And I'm sure that kind of announcement will come once we understand fully what the NCOP process is, and whether the president signs it into law or not. So that you can take as a certainty that a legal challenge will come, whether it will be a collective civil society challenge or whether there will be many from different quarters, I think is unpredictable at this point in time. But I think what I think we would really want is for policymakers to understand that there is no intention to want to disrupt elections. There's no intention to want to ensure that the 2024 elections are postponed for any particular reason. But that would be a call that I think those who are drafting the legislation and ultimately the person who has to sign it into law would have to take into account as they make their own decisions.
I think when we talk about those 2024 elections, even though the bill does indicate that individuals or individual candidates can stand in the provincial and national elections, the bill really just stacks the odds against them. So while we don't want to see a postponement, while we ventilate issues around this bill, in its current form, it really just is unfair towards those individuals who want to defend our democracy. And really, it's almost meaningless, if I may say so, Neeshan, without sounding too harsh.
No, it's beyond meaningless. I think it's a failed opportunity to really improve the quality of our democracy. Our electoral system was meant to have been a temporary measure. Parliament, and not the executive, was meant to have devised a new electoral system. They have failed in that task. Parliament has likewise failed over the years to hold the executive to account. And if you look at the myriad of crisis issues in this country, it is very difficult to find where Parliament has stamped its authority over the executive. And that's the fundamental issue that is at play here. As that first clip that you showed, I think is the most classic example of why the electoral system needs to be amended. As I said, there should be no reason for thousands of people to be gathered into a tent to line up in kind of queues just to have 2 minutes with the president, when their members of parliament should be doing that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, thank you very much, Neeshan, for your time this morning. Very important insights there. That is Defend Our Democracies. Neeshan Bolton joining us there to speak about the electoral reform and really just the kind of specifics that currently exist in the bill and the amendments that are necessary to defend the country's democracy.